Del Gregory is a UK-based creative who has certainly led a fascinating life of travel, which has historically been driven by his work as a photographer. He began his professional career at the ripe age of 20 as a fashion photographer, but then found a groove shooting architecture, luxury hotels, and exotic locations mainly. As retirement was looming, Del decided to create a new type of magazine called B500, an online-only periodical featuring various cars and people from around the world. Impressive is the word that immediately comes to mind given he launched just before COVID-19 took the world by storm. Like many of us, Del is a one-man band and his work now includes 7 issues of B500. Again, an incredibly impressive feat given the last year of our existence. We go into how he's grown his audience while exploring how he defines B500's success. We chat about his early days getting into the weeds of photography as well as the equipment he uses. Del even gives us a glimpse into his life being chauffeured in helicopters around islands in the Indian Ocean. What a life that must have been. All that and more in what was truly a fun conversation with Del. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H Podcast. Well, Del, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's very kind of you to ask.
Yeah, what do you have behind you there on the wall? Looks like a McLaren F1.
It's yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a piece of art that I produced a couple of years back.
Oh, nice.
When I was sort of photo painting.
Oh, okay.
And I did a bunch of them for various people that had nice cars, and I just fancied doing that one for myself.
Oh, nice.
They're on canvas, so it's acrylic over canvas.
Oh, cool. So it's in that McLaren orange as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I mean, what more can you say about an F1? I mean, that's arguably one of the most beautiful cars ever done.
I think so, yeah. I think I'm not quite sure how I feel about the new, what's his name? The Gordon Murray.
Yeah.
The new one, yeah.
With the fan in the back or whatever that is.
Yeah. Not quite sure yet, but I'm sure it will be, it's probably sold out. I'm sure it's sold out already.
Sure.
But interestingly, I'm not a huge fan. I like the McLaren, but I'm not what I'd say a massive fan. I kind of prefer things like the original Aston Martins, sort of the DB4s from my era.
Yeah, sure.
The 60s, the DB4, DB5. In fact, I'm shooting a DB6. It's one of my first shoots since what will be the end of lockdown in a month or so from now, for the next issue of B500.
Sure.
So I'm shooting a DB6 in a little village near where we live. So quite looking forward to that.
Oh, nice. Is it kind of the standard silver or gray?
It's not actually. It's a really unusual color. It's the guy that's got it is calling it a James Bond gold, but it's not a James Bond gold really. It's a little slight shade difference, but it's effectively it's one of those colors that can look a different color in different lights.
Oh yeah, I love those.
Yeah, whereas you see a silver car and you think that's a silver car, or a blue or even a green, nice sort of sage green. It's sage green. But this is unusual because it can also look sort of reddy pink in different lights as well.
Oh, interesting.
It's almost like a rose gold, if you like.
Wow, that sounds really interesting.
It's yeah. I mean, some people say it's bronze. Some people say it's like rose gold. Some people say it's gold. He says It's gold. I'll have to look up what the official color is when I get a little bit nearer to the shoot.
Yeah.
For the article, but yeah, it's it'll be a good one. A nice little village. We live in an area of outstanding beauty in the Cotswolds in England. Some lovely sort of golden stone cottages to sort of park it up against that are timeless, so it'll look like it could be from the correct era of the 60s.
Well, sure. And what I love most about Europe and or England or anywhere else around that area, but it's that juxtaposition of having such old buildings and then mixing that with modern objects. Like I love the idea of a very old home with very modern furniture in it. And actually, just the other day on Instagram, actually, there's like a 16th century chapel or church that somebody converted into their home. and really modern furnishings on the inside. And it was just the coolest because there it was like the walls are the same material as the ceilings, and like everything is just cohesive back then because of the building, philosophies and materials at the time. So it's just so cool. I just love that juxtaposition. But Del, if we could rewind for a second, where were you born? You were born in the UK, right?
Oh, yeah, I was born in the UK. I was born in London.
Okay. And how long did you stay in London?
Well, I was born in 1960 in London. So we stayed until, or I stayed until I was 16. So until 1976. And then I left school and really wanted to travel. I'd been photographing already for 3 years since I was 13. And my
Wow.
dad had built a dark room in my bedroom that I used to share with my brother. My brother's 9 years older than me, so by this time he'd gone off to university. So I had the room to myself, and it was a big room. So my dad converted half the room into a dark room. So I used to get home from school and go and develop my own films. And then when I was 16, for my 16th birthday, they bought me a really great camera for the time, which was the Olympus OM1 with some lenses. And that was really the real start of my proper interest in photography. So to answer your question, I left in the following year in 77. And I made a massive jump from London because I went from London to Vancouver.
Right, right. Well, what were your folks doing while you were a kid? And did your dad shoot photography as well?
No, he
Was it
didn't.
so he built that darkroom just for you?
Literally just for me, yeah. I mean, I think I wouldn't say I was a rebellious child, but I was probably a kid that didn't really know what he wanted to do until I was around 13. Now, I don't think that's unusual, but once I
Right.
hit 13, and I used to borrow his camera, which was a Helena Paulette, I remember. And I used to use up all the film in it, and he's, great, we'll have to get you a camera one day. And then, as I say, when I hit 16, that's exactly what they did. And it kind of went from there. But he had no kind of real interest. He had more interest in art, which is maybe where my creative side comes from. But he was an artist, so he would set up easels and paint ships and all sorts of stuff. My mum not so artistic, more practical. And so no real photographic interest, not really. So I guess because I wasn't a particularly good painter, I could express myself through photography.
Sure.
Back then, of course, everything was film, so you've got to cut your teeth on understanding cameras, really. And so it took 2 or 3 years to get to grips with speeds, film speeds, ISO, apertures, shutter speed, all the rest of it. And then it kind of kicked off from there. And we have some family that moved to Canada. They had a successful business here in the UK, just outside London.
In what industry were they in?
They had a farm, and it became a successful farm, and they had like a roadside shop that ended up being almost something like the size of a supermarket at the side of the road. It was huge, selling just about everything. And my uncle was in insurance, and he retired, and they decided to up sticks from London or from Kent, where they had lived at this time, to Canada. And there was an open invitation to all family members: if ever you want to come out to Canada, come out. And of course, at that time, it wasn't, I know I'm only going back to 70, 76, 77, but there wasn't the travel and the aircraft travel like there is today. You don't, nowadays you just go, yeah, okay, I'll be there. I'll see you in 10 hours. But back then it was like a major operation, a major trip. So,
And they had silverware on the plane back then. It wasn't just plastic, it was actually like proper flatware.
yeah, I do remember that. Yeah. And sort of almost like a silver service, like China service as well.
Yeah.
So I made this decision and said to my parents, I think I'm going to go out and visit aunt and uncle and my cousins. And they thought, seems like a good idea. So of course, packed the camera, went from London to Vancouver, my first trip abroad at the age of 17.
What did that flight cost? Do you have any idea?
Um, no, I don't really, but I seem to remember that it would have been somewhere around the sort of 260, 280 pounds, something like that. So maybe 300, maybe $400, something like that.
Incredible.
It was my first trip was an interesting one because there was a guy who was doing budget flights back then called Freddie Laker, and he had aircraft. They were DC-10s, and he called them Sky Trains, but they were flying London, New York was the main route for Freddie Laker.
Sure.
He was doing the first kind of budget travel, but that he then expanded out to other areas. And one of the routes he did, and I don't know why, it might be worth Googling why. I never have done, but he flew to Vancouver. So I got my first trip on a Freddie Laker SkyTrain to Vancouver. And it kind of was the start of what then became a 17-year love affair with Canada, where I ended up living. So I was backwards and forwards every year until I was 34, and lived there for 8 years.
Wow.
That's quite a big leap from 17, but effectively, excuse me, I became a professional photographer about age 20, and I would be in Vancouver, and then I'd travel down to LA, do some fashion shots down there, sometimes out to the islands, to Hawaii. And it kind of has grown ever since from there. So I've hardly ever put a camera down, and I've hardly had a year where I've not been on a plane.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably true for a lot of us. With regards to what you were shooting subject-wise, did you ever get into landscape photography or anything like that? I mean, Vancouver's so picturesque.
It is. I'll tell you what's funny about that is that my 17-year as I call it, love affair with Canada and British Columbia in particular. It's a funny story because having lived there for such a long time and photographed and worked, if you like, out there, I'm one of those people that I don't photograph where I am because I always think I'm there. So I'm going to see it tomorrow and I'll do it tomorrow. And consequently, when I did come back in 1994, I suddenly realized I hadn't photographed any of the British Columbian landscape. I had thousands of pictures of fashion models and cars and goodness knows what else, but I had no pictures. And I did kick myself in the back of the shins a little bit and thought, why haven't you got any? I had a few, but nothing like. And I guess it came down to interest as well, subject interest.
Sure.
And I was a lot younger then, and possibly didn't appreciate that landscape as I certainly would now.
Sure.
And so I travelled, all through BC and Alberta and way up north of BC, and pretty much every province of Canada during my time that I was there, from east to west. But ended up living in BC, in the interior, about 200 miles from Vancouver, inland between Calgary and Vancouver, in a place called the Okanagan Valley.
So what made you settle there as opposed to the city proper if you're shooting things like fashion?
I think it was wanting a home rather than a place of business. So it was having almost like wanting the best of both worlds, and at that time being able to have it. So we lived in a house on the lake. It's not difficult in Canada to live by a lake.
Right.
But there was a 90-mile long lake called Lake Okanagan, and the city at the southern end is Penticton, and the city at the northern end is Vernon. And I lived in and it's a wonderful sounding place. I lived in a little tiny place called Peachland, which is halfway up the lake in the hills. And it was a lovely, lovely house that overlooked the lake. But it was in those times where you could jump on a plane to Vancouver and be there in an hour, right, if you wanted to do that. And then, of course, catch a connection to wherever you wanted, out to the islands or down to LA or whatever. So it's a bit like having the best of both worlds, really.
Yeah.
I was with a girl at the time. It was a girlfriend at the time I was living with, and she had a place in Vancouver in Granville Island, which was not too shabby, and a nice place to get to when we wanted to be in the city. And then we had the house on the lake in the Okanagan. So it really was like living the best of both worlds, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds incredible from a lifestyle perspective. What got you into shooting fashion to begin with? Were you shooting men and women, or just women, or?
I was shooting women, and I guess the answer answer to that, what got me into it, was women. Um,
I was gonna say it's that's enough for me.
I think if you ask someone like David Bailey that question, he doesn't smile when he says it. He just very dryly says women.
Yeah.
It's like almost like an obvious answer to him, but no, it was very much a case of I had an interest in fashion. I had a very healthy interest in women, if we can say it in that context. And basically, I was young. I was a photographer. I had a British accent, and I was having a great time in places like LA and Hawaii and Vancouver. So
Right.
I had some connections as well, which of course is always a way in the door of one particular area of anything, in this case of photography. So I did some fashion work there, and then I did some fashion work in the obvious places in the UK as well, and Europe, like Milan and Paris, London. Not terribly serious stuff, not the circuit as they would call it, but my own stuff. And then I had a magazine called Fashion House, and that was running here and running in Vancouver as well. And it was funny because in the Okanagan in BC, they hadn't seen anything like it before. They hadn't seen somebody come into this little area and produce a fashion magazine. So I sort of shook it up a little bit, and they enjoyed that, and I enjoyed producing it and doing the traveling. And I guess, almost to that point of, here I am 40 years later, still doing that kind of thing, only now with cars and car culture.
So I'm assuming you moved on from that initial Olympus. What were you shooting with those early days of like your magazine type stuff?
Yeah, I did move on. I went on to Nikon or Nikon
Okay.
after
Yep.
that, and still manual cameras like FM2s, that sort of thing, which again I enjoyed. It was still way before digital. This was, so I was still shooting film, 35mm film, and then I started to delve a little bit into bigger film. So I go to I got a Mamiya 6x7. So much clearer, bigger film, and then I went down the inevitable Hasselblad route,
Yeah.
shooting 6x6. Um,
No, I guess that's still considered medium format then.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And now, nowadays I've got a project that I'm working on at the moment, which will be shooting with a very old Fuji 6x9. So going back to film, there's a lot of photographers now that are sort of making that leap back. Digital is great, but a lot of people are now saying, let's get back to how it used to be, and there's a much greater understanding, I think, of how cameras work when you work with film, and of course it's much more labor intensive. So you're having to work a lot harder to get the results, but you're also having to wait a lot longer to get the results, which of course back then it was nothing. You just took that as how it was, but nowadays, as my partner Caroline reminded me last night, you've got your phone, which you take a snap and you're looking at it in that second.
Right.
How would I have, she said, how will you cope now, back with film? Because I'm so impatient. The older I get, the more impatient I get. And I said, well, it's because it's almost like a hobby side of what I'm going to be doing. I'll just wait, but it's fine. It is what it is. But I wasn't in fashion for very long. About 3-4 years, I guess.
Okay.
And next was luxury hotels.
Okay. So how did you find your voice then within photography?
Yeah, mostly because it was through magazines, and it was again. I think that I was. I think I was. I guess we all say that, but I think I was born in a great time in the '60s, so that by the time I hit, the mid '70s at age 17. The jobs were not scarce. Jobs were free for all, and I just made the decision to become a photographer. It wasn't something that I had to give much thought to, because that was what I wanted to do, and I saw that as okay, that's what I'll do. And by the time I was 20, I was earning through supplying shots to magazines in different parts of the world. But I lost the interest in fashion just because there's so much standing around waiting for all the prepping for models. So whilst they were prepping, I was if we were in some exotic location like Fiji, I was looking at the hotels and barely concentrating on the job, thinking, yeah, this is an amazing hotel. Let's take some shots of this.
Yeah, very controlled environment as well.
Yeah, and of course hotels don't answer back. And I mean that in the nicest sense. It's just that it's something that's static, and you can get on with the job. When it's done, you walk away, and you can do it on your own. You just take pictures of the hotels. But I went through a phase of there was a point where I kind of made the decision to only photograph islands and exotic locations, and again single myself out for wanting to be a photographer that was known for shooting islands and luxury sort of resorts, if you like. So I then took it a stage further and made the decision to be an aerial photographer of hotels, because there weren't too many of those around at the time. So that was kind of the next leap, if you like, and that really worked out for me because, as I say, there weren't many. And I was invited by the Seychelles government to go and work in the Seychelles for 6 months, which again was not too shabby.
Yeah.
And so I thought, yeah, why not? And I was taken all around by the Seychelles government to all of the Seychelles Islands. I had a helicopter at my disposal whenever I wanted it for aerial shots. I just had to make a call. My pilot, who was Swiss, would turn up wherever I was staying in the hotel, in the helicopter, door off. I'd get in, strap myself in, hang out the helicopter, and do the aerial shots. Of course, nowadays, again, that's another job that's doesn't exist because of drones.
Right. And you must have had one heck of a steady hand as well, because I mean the vibrations and such. I mean, helicopters move around so much.
Yeah, and good pilots. But I did a lot of that in Canada as well. I used to photograph for the BC Fire Service, so I'd photograph bushfires in the summer months, and then I'd photograph winter resorts, ski resorts in the winter. So I'd burn myself in the summer, and I'd freeze myself in the winter.
Oh my gosh!
I used to have a really good friend in Canada that was the chief pilot for Canadian helicopters. And he used to, in the winter, just say, he'd phone me up and say, do you want to go skiing today? And I'd go, yeah, that'd be good. I said, do you want me to meet you up the hill? And he'd say, no, I'll pick you up. And I said, what, in the company car? Which is what I used to call his helicopter.
Right.
Yeah, I'll pick you up in the company car. So I said, okay, fine. And he'd land. I had an apartment at that time. And he'd land in the car park, and then I'd go out and put the skis in the ski pod below, and then I'd jump in and we'd fly up to the top, and he would let me out at the top, so I'd get to ski down all the first morning virgin snow, and then he'd go and land in the car park, and then put his skis on and come join me. So it was good times.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Wow. So who was hiring you back then? Like, what magazines were you working with mostly?
A lot of them were local too. In Canada, there was a lot of local sort of Canadian magazines at the time, sort of what I'd call regional magazines. So there were a couple in BC that were local. But a lot of the work that I've done over the years since that time has been for myself. So I've always thought that as a photographer, if I wanted to make, some better money back then, why don't you just cut out the whole thing of selling your work to magazines and produce the whole thing, produce a magazine? Because I had this design and design interest and writing interest as well at the time. And I'd studied English and thought, well, I might as well put it to good use and write as well as photograph. So I produced a magazine in Canada called Fashion House. That was quite successful. I then did a local one in the Okanagan that became quite successful. Then a couple of books. And then sold the books, printed them, got a printer in Saskatchewan to print in bulk, shipped them to BC, sold them all in BC, and went on to the next project.
These were all just cold calls? Like, how did you find publishers and the actual manufacturing of the magazine, so to speak?
Well, I became sole publisher. I became the publisher of the magazines. So I basically did everything. So a little bit like I'm doing with B500, I from start to finish. So I have that background, if you like. So it was when I, to bring it forward for a minute, when I decided to do B500, it was a little bit like falling off a log, because I've been doing that sort of project for 30, 40 years. So going back to then, I found it an easier way of actually doing business than trying to approach magazines, and then they have to go through decision-making process, and they have to get 12 people around a table. And I've never been one of those people. I like dealing with the main person of a business, so they make decisions. And the older I've got, the more that's the case. If somebody's going to say, "Oh, I need a committee and I need to sit around a table for 3 weeks," then I tend to move on. If you can make a decision and you think it's a good idea what I'm offering, let's do some business. And that's kind of has been my mantra, I guess, for quite a number of years now.
Right.
And so I did, from about, I guess I was about 25 by this time, start publishing myself of magazines and books. So I did a book on the 5-star hotels of Fiji, the same with Seychelles, same with Mauritius. And they were all places where I had all the content, because I'd been down there photographing out of helicopters. So I already had all that. I then just said to the hotels, do you want these images? And they were, back then it was like, yeah, we want aerial shots. Wow, we've never seen these. Yeah. So it was a bit of a kind of a double whammy, because they'd buy the images, and then I also had them in the books and magazines. So I was selling the books and magazines and the images to the hotels. And of course, right, that's gone now as well, because of Instagram.
Yeah. And I bet a lot of those images nowadays wouldn't be as beautiful as they were back then, because I mean, who pays attention to the roof, of the hotel these days? Or they're just clad with solar panels or something like that, where it's like,
yeah, I think it was, I remember there were a couple of shoots I did in Fiji where they're hard to forget, because it was such a dramatic approach. So we approached sort of from 50 feet towards the beach, and the hotel sort of opens up. But again, these days you'd shoot that with a drone. Right. You'd take that drone off the beach, you'd take it out, a few meters out to sea, and then you'd bring it back in filming. And so that doesn't exist anymore, which is why you don't see low-flying helicopters over hotels anymore, because you don't, with guys hanging out the side, because you just don't need to go to that expense. You get a $500 drone with a good camera in it, and you can do that stuff.
Yeah. Have you been back to any of those 5-star hotels to see any maybe renovations or anything like that, where your book presents almost a different object, so to speak?
I have a nice story about that, actually. I have a perhaps perfect story to your question. 20 years ago, I was invited to the opening of a private island in the Maldives, and I obviously went and I photographed the island. And then, but I guess it was about 4 years ago, was the 25th anniversary. So say it was 25 years back, I went. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I was invited back to do it again for their 25th anniversary. So I said to Caroline, look, this is an opportunity for us to go down there for a week. They're offering me this gig to do this as a, I shot it 20 years ago. Let's go back, see what it's like, and I'm going to shoot it again, and they're going to have all the images. Well, about that time, I'd also been offered to become a Hasselblad ambassador. So Hasselblad said, hey, look, if you're going to do this, here's a bunch of cameras, take them with you, and we'll have all those images. Thank you very much. So I said,
incredible.
Yeah, that works for me. So the fun part of the story is that here we are down on this idyllic island in the middle of the Indian Ocean in the Maldives that you can walk around in like 20 minutes. And we had one day of rain, just one. So I said to Caroline, yeah, let's go. They've got a library. Let's just go. It's raining. Let's go in the library. So we did. And she's sitting down with a book, and I'm looking through the books on the shelf. And all of a sudden I go, oh my goodness. And she said, what? I said, look what I've found. And it was my book from 25 years ago.
Yeah.
That was, a little bit old and ragged, but it was on their bookshelf from a book that I had produced 25 years ago and put that particular island into. And that was, for me, that was, like the ultimate. It was, here I am 25 years later, back on the island. There's a book of mine down here in the Indian Ocean on their bookshelf. So yeah, that was pretty special. And they gave us just the most incredible time as well for that week that we were down there. And so yeah, I have a couple of times I've been back to different places. I've never been back to the Seychelles, but I think I kind of did that so much that it's one of those places I don't feel the need to probably ever go back to, because I was there for 6 months. Mauritius, we've made quite a few trips back to.
Sure.
Because it's such a diverse island for hotels. And Hawaii, I ended up, my first marriage, I ended up getting married in Hawaii. So we went out and we flew into Oahu and did the tour of Oahu, and the Honolulu, the obvious stuff. And then we flew to Kauai and we toured Kauai, and then we got married on Lanai.
Oh, nice. Yeah. The Four Seasons.
Yeah. At Manale Bay. Yeah. And there's another one in the hills on Lanai called the Lodge at Koeli.
Yeah, that's it's kind of like a hunting type.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
situation.
And it's almost like a British hunting lodge. The mist comes down into the pines, and it's very different from driving back down the hill to the beach. Very different.
Yeah.
Great experience. I absolutely adore Hawaii.
Right.
I mean, who wouldn't? But there's it's a long way from the UK, which is why I'm glad when I lived on the West Coast that I did it so often, because it's a heck of a journey from here, but was nowhere near that journey from LA or Vancouver.
You and I share something that I think a lot of creatives live out. You and I both are the type to stay up late.
Yeah.
Have you always been that way, and are you still somewhat of a night owl even today?
Yeah, completely. It's I put it down to about 10 or 15 years ago, I went to see a doctor because I wasn't sleeping. And he said, "Tell me about your lifestyle. What have you done?" And I said, "Well, I've traveled all around the world for like 40 years. And he said, "I'll stop you there." So I said, "Okay." He said, "It's your body clock.
Your circadian rhythm." Yeah.
It doesn't have a clue what day of the week it is, let alone what hour." So I said, "Yeah, that makes sense." So he said, "No, seriously, that's why." He said, "Do you find yourself falling asleep at 2 p.m.?" I went, "Yeah, but that could be age." He said, "No, that's because your body clock doesn't have a clue where you're at." So I said, "Is there any way around it?" And he sort of shook his head in the negative and said, "No, you've kind of ruined your system," because I was literally back then on planes once a week, and I was doing some contract work for an American publishing company, and I was flying to Washington and New York every 10 days, 2 weeks, and then I was flying to LA from London. This was obviously when I was back after 1994. And so by the time I got there and I was expected to work at the other end once I landed in LA, it was there's a funny story about a bit of work. Actually, I flew from London to LA, and we'd always it was with some editor guys that from this American publishing company that I was working with on a contract. And so it's 12-hour flight from London, and we'd always had a little bit of drink on board, quite a little bit of drink on board, but we were always expected to work as soon as we got off, whatever the time. So there was this one trip we were due, you call it work, but they were parties. They were some music industry parties. So I was ferried to this party in LA, having just got off the plane, still staggering around, having drunk so much on the plane. So for 12 hours, hadn't slept. And I was introduced to a couple of people, and I had a bottle of Budweiser in my left hand, which is the hand I wear my watch.
I'm so sorry, by the way, for the Budweiser.
Yeah. So this Bud's for you, as they say. Yeah. And so I'm introduced to Michael Stipe from REM.
Wow.
So guy says, this is Del Gregory. This is Michael Stipe. Hey, hi. And we do the hi, how you doing? So halfway through a conversation with Michael Stipe, he says, "What time do you have?" And so I got the bottle in my left, and I've got some cream chinos on, which were all the rage back then, trust me. And I look at my watch, and I hadn't realized, because I'm slightly drunk and I'm also jet lagged, that I'm tipping the entire bottle of Bud down the front of me before he then says, "Hey, dude, yeah, look." And I go, "Oh man," and half a bottle of Bud down the front. But what if that's not funny enough? That's a great introduction to being introduced to Michael Stipe. If that's not funny enough, we then had to go to another party after that.
Oh no!
Time to change my trousers, and it was the British ambassador. It was the American ambassador to Britain who was hosting a party in LA. So I wheeled into this party. By this time, I think it was 10 p.m. I probably have, sort of an overnight shadow beard, where I hadn't been to sleep, and staggering slightly, and the whole of my crotch covered in
beer.
Well, yeah, beer. I knew that, but nobody else knew that. And then I'm introduced to the British ambassador in Los Angeles, and they were funny times. They were good times.
I don't know. It sounds like you might have fit right into LA.
Maybe.
Well, I'm a watch nut. What was the watch you were wearing?
Oh, back then?
Yeah, when you met Michael Stipe.
Wow. It was probably wow, now you're asking. It was probably, I would think, a Tag Formula One.
Okay.
Something like that.
Car related.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I didn't think of it like that, but yeah, probably was. I have gone through a lot of watches. I don't have a lot of disposable income to spend on watches that I perhaps would like to buy.
Join the club.
Well, I have my eye on I was 60 in last July, and I had my eye on a Chopard Millet with the Dunlop strap, and I've still got my eye on that, but it hasn't materialized yet in my watch box. But I have got a Caroline bought me, which was fantastic. My first manual watch box with a glass front, so that I can see the watches turning. And I don't have particularly very expensive watches in it at the moment, but I like I've got a custom made black and rose gold Seiko that was like a one of one that somebody made. Then I've got a yellow face Seiko, and I've got a rather beautiful, don't know if you'll have heard of these guys, JS watch of Reykjavik.
Oh yeah, in Iceland, yeah.
Well, I actually flew to Iceland to pick it up, which is all part of so I had it made by these guys, and they're not, I think it was a couple of thousand, maybe $2,000 or $3,000, so not ridiculously.
Yeah, I think they're about $2,000. I was looking at one with the Roman numerals on it. It's like their 38 millimeter. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, just such a beautiful, almost kind of ornate looking for the price, and it's just a really great dress watch, I think.
And it's the people. It was about the people, because I just thought they're such lovely people, and we'd been communicating via email. And it was a magazine some years back that I was working on, I guess back in 2011, 2012, something like that. And I wanted to do an article, but I thought, well, there's nothing better than actually buying the product and actually going to pick it up. So we organized all that, and then something happened and I couldn't go. So I was quite disappointed about that. And then I got into another job, so I couldn't, some more work. And then eventually I wrote back and I said, look, I really need to come over, pick the watch up, but I really want to meet you guys, because we'd had a really good relationship on email by this point. And they were fantastic. I got over there, and they took me out to dinner, and we went to a lovely restaurant in Reykjavik, some nice local foods, and then they took me around the island, and I saw the Northern Lights. I was incredibly lucky. Wow. And then of course I picked up my watch, and they've got like a hall of fame of celebrity that have worked in Iceland and then always go into JS Watch to buy a watch. So they had, Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks and various other film stars that were on the wall collecting their watch. And they're just such nice people. They're such a small team of people and their master watch guy that puts them all together, and their limited run. So yeah, it's a really great experience if anyone wants to enjoy Iceland and Reykjavik and buy a lovely watch as well.
Yeah, I also love the kind of their photography, if you will. It's very whimsical approach to, he's usually got the loop on his forehead and
Yeah, yeah,
with
he's the guy. I mean, he's I can't his name doesn't spring to mind, and I don't want to try and pronounce something that's not going to be right. Um, but yeah, he's the main man.
yeah.
They do a lot of, as you say, very whimsical. There's one in a really muted colors in swimsuits, old-fashioned swimsuits in a pool, and
Yeah.
then they've got the old-fashioned old Dakota aircraft and flying jackets. Yeah, they're a really good bunch of guys,
Yeah.
and it's a family thing. So yeah, if anyone, seriously get over to Iceland and buy one of those.
If you haven't heard episode 1 of the Standard Age podcast, then let me tell you about my friend Tim Jackson. As owner of Passion Fine Jewelry, Tim and his team specialize in fine jewelry as well as some of the finest independent watch brands available. I'm talking about Groenfeld, Habring, Kudoki, Roger Smith, Roman Gauthier, Sarpaneva, the list goes on. The staff at Passion Fine Jewelry is literally made up of friends and family, so you will feel right at home if and when you visit. If California is out of reach, you can absolutely email or call the shop and they'll get you sorted. Visit passionfinejewelry.com for more information. As you all know, I'm a huge fan of using the right product for the right job, and like many of you, I appreciate products with a story. That's why I drive a Volkswagen GTI. It's a hot hatch with heritage. It's also why I'm into specific watches like my Tudor Black Bay. And that's exactly why I'm a fan of the indie accessory brand Cantonment. Cantonment makes a utilitarian cloth they simply call a kerchief. It's smaller than a standard bandana, but larger than a handkerchief, which makes it ideal to tuck in a back pocket or use as a neckerchief. I always take one on a bike ride or have one with me as a backup face covering. Not only do these kerchiefs satisfy several functions, but they look great too. Each set features illustrations celebrating icons of product design like the Omega Speedmaster, the Fender Stratocaster, or my favorite of course, the classic GTI. Follow them on Instagram at Cantonment Co. That's CantonmentCo, or visit them at cantonment.co. And use the code STANDARDH in all caps, no spaces, for 20% off of absolutely everything in their online shop. Now let's get back to the show. Well, let's skip forward to B500 then. So what was the transition and how did B500 grow? Oh, first of all, explain what B500 is.
Okay, so I'll go back a couple of years to my sort of semi-retirement, if you like. Let me take it back a little step further, actually, because I made the decision when we had our daughter. I've got one daughter, Elizabeth, who's now 18, but she's born in 2002, and it was at that time I was kind of burning out doing all of these sort of Michael Stipe type things. And all of these LA trips and couldn't really take the pace anymore. And I was in Vegas, I was in LA, I was in Washington. And in the end, I just thought, do you know what? I've got a new daughter that I need to spend more time with at home. And so I'll take it easy and start doing more work here. So I did some contract publishing here. Bring that forward to about 3 or 4 years ago. My daughter by then was 15. And I kind of decided to sort of semi-retire, if you like, and just do projects, cherry pick projects that I want to work with.
Sure.
I was still very much into publishing and photography, of course. Mm-hmm. So had the fact it was my life, really. So I decided to produce another magazine, and I thought, well, what do I want to do this time? And it came to me really quickly, and it was car and car culture, because I was, like a lot of people, I was subscribed to a lot of magazines, and it wasn't that I thought I could do it better. I just thought that I could do it. It doesn't have to be better. It just has to be something that you're happy to do, because it was almost like a not a vanity project, but a retirement project. Mm-hmm. So that brings us to about January of last year. Where I made the decision that I was going to go ahead with this and do something, and I would call it B500. And the reason I called it B500, there's a quite a funny backstory, because I'll tell you my reasons, and then I'll tell you because I can't tell a lie, I'll have to tell you the full story.
Please.
I was talking to the managing director of an Aston Martin dealership. And this was when we produced the first issue last year. And he said, "Oh, B500, cool name." He said, "Yeah, you've obviously named that after that brilliant driving road in Germany, in Bavaria, the B500. And I went, yeah, no. So he said, "Oh, right." So he said, "Oh, you'll have to tell people that's why you." So I said, "Yeah, I will now. But because I can't tell lies, I also have to tell the real reason." So that would make a great story in its own, that I've named it after this road in Bavaria. You know, it's a brilliant driving road. But the truth of the matter is that several years ago, I launched what was then the first ever luxury portal for billionaires. Oh. And it was quite successful, and I sold the business. But it was the first one of its kind. So it was like a magazine online, but in digital format, but as a portal.
How did you get in touch with them? Like, how did you?
I had some connections through some of the work that I'd been doing as a photographer, but also as a consultant in business to various people. And so I'd made some connections, and back then it was such a small little club. So I decided to call the portal Billionaire 500, because when I started it, which was the project I started in the UK when my daughter was born back in 2002, I decided that I would call it after the number of billionaires. So it was 500 at the time.
I was going to say, yeah.
Now like 2,500 globally. But at the time there were 500. So it was Billionaire 500, and it had a great ring about it. So it's a kind of, B500's kind of a little bit of a nod to my past, if you like. So nobody needed to know that really. But of course now I tell everyone, because of the Aston Martin guy that said, "Hey, it's named after the road in Bavaria." And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to say it was, but..." And then, of course, I have to explain that it wasn't. It was named after
a better reason.
Yeah, I did 20 years ago or whatever. So yeah, but I had Billionaire 500, sold it in 2007, very luckily just before the Lehman crash. And
now, what kinds of things were on? You said it's a portal. Like, what does that entail?
Well, it pretty much entails putting together a daily or weekly magazine. Instagram wasn't around then. So it's like it was a website that you would load up daily with content for sale, and pitch it through a private access code password to your database of billionaires and multimillionaires through real estate companies and through private jet companies and so on.
So it was like a transactional website.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you could list your yacht for somebody to purchase. Okay.
So a little bit like today, it's a little bit like James List.
Yeah, or like Rob Report.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly. Like Rob Report or James List. So always in that sort of publishing vein where there's a potential for a magazine or a website.
Or I guess more like DuPont Registry. I guess that's probably a better example than Rob Report.
Similar kind of things. DuPont, Rob, they're all kind of similar. But yeah, DuPont very much so.
Yeah.
So that's the background to how it started. But going back to January of last year, I made the decision to do B500 as a magazine, as a digital online magazine, and produce it free with no subscription. I'm kind of one of those people that I'm not very fond of clubs and exclusivity. Having said that, I've just come from the Billionaire 500 world. Almost like a contradiction, but that was 20 years ago. This is now. And I think that I just feel that to offer something to everyone and have it free would have, back then, be a great idea. And of course, it's an idea that's continued. So how it started back in January, February of last year, which is hard to believe it's only January, February last year, was that I was due to go to Milan for my first front cover. And I know the guys at Touring Superleggera quite well. And I'd photographed their Disco Volante series. And I thought it would be great to have Touring Superleggera on the front cover of the launch issue of B500. So I organized that and bought the tickets to fly. And then, of course, what happened next was that Milan was the first city in Europe to go into lockdown. So cancel the tickets, And I'm sitting there on a Friday thinking, what am I going to do now in early March? So what do? I send an email to Magnus Walker in LA.
And had you met Magnus before?
No, never met Magnus. Knew of Magnus, and I knew about his cars. I knew he was from Sheffield, so I'm a fellow Brit. Knew about obviously his Porsche collection, etc., etc. Never met him. Tracked his email down, sent him an email, and I said to Caroline, "Well, I'm not going to get a reply, but I'm going to send it anyway for a bit of fun." And within about 2 hours, I got a reply from Magnus saying, "Hey, fella, yeah, how about coming and see me next Tuesday?"
So what did your email say?
My email said the sort of abridged version was, "Hey, I'm starting a new car culture magazine. It's coming out in April, issue 1. Would you like to be on the front cover? Great, thanks, Del." And literally that was it, not expecting even a reply.
Well, I only ask because, like most people, like I would say of any sort of notoriety or fame, would, like for my podcast, for example, right? Like if I tried to get somebody super famous as the first guest, they'd be like, who are you? You know what I mean? And especially given that you'd never met Magnus before, the reason I ask is because that initial email, that outreach obviously was compelling in some way. So I was just curious as to what verbiage you used.
I think that also Magnus is unique in that sphere, and I say that because now I've got to know him a little bit over the last year. The reason I say that is because I think he has an amazing attitude to people who clearly want to do work around Porsche and around cars, and he has a philosophy whereby I think he just thinks, well, yeah, why not? Not why should I do it? Why not? So he would have to find a reason not to do it, and that's Absolutely. a great philosophy. So I got this email back on a Friday saying, yeah, come next Tuesday. So I emailed him back straight away saying, okay, you do realize I'm in the UK? And he said, yeah, Tuesday, 9:00. So I went, okay. So I said to Caroline, hey, I'm going to LA next Monday. So she said, what? So I said, yeah, I've got to jump on a plane. So over the weekend, I packed a bag, got the cameras, and I bought a ticket. LA was still open. You know, it was only Europe that had shut down. So I jumped on the plane on the Monday, got to LA, this time completely sober. And
fair enough.
Yeah, having learned that lesson many years ago. And I got off the plane, had a hotel at LAX, got up the following morning, Tuesday morning, jumped in an Uber to DTLA,
right.
And 9 a.m., knocked on his door, and there he was, went in, said hi, spent the day with Magnus taking pictures, chatting about England, fish and chips, Marmite, all sorts of different things, his mum in Sheffield. Had a great day. Then I got back in the Uber, back to the hotel, and then flew back to London.
No kidding.
So yeah, and I think there was a, you know, Magnus, I think, respected the fact that I said I'd do it and I turned up. That's the first thing. But I also think the thing that I think he respected was the fact that I'd only actually gone out there to do that with him. So it was I'm flying in to do this with you, then I'm jumping on a plane, I'm flying back. Then I'm going to spend a month putting it all together, which is what I did. And then the launch issue came out on 15th of April. So to bring that forward to where we are right now, I'm literally in the process right now as we speak of putting together the spring issue of 2021, which will come out on the exact same day as I published issue 1.
Beautiful.
April 15 will be the spring issue. And I managed to pull together 6 issues 2020 through a global, lockdown. So I'm pleased with that. And I had a lot of help and a lot of people who, I mean, you mentioned earlier, why would Magnus give me the time of day, which is effectively, a really good question. And then I have to ask myself, why would Etienne Salome, the former Bugatti designer, give me the time of day, and Sasha Selepanov, the current designer of Koenigsegg, and I could list on and on, but they all have. And as each issue has come out, so it's kind of progressed to a next stage where people are phoning and saying, "Hey, really love what you're doing. It's slightly different to anything we've seen. Would you be interested in doing a story with us?" And it's also about people who know people. So Magnus knew Phil, who I know you know,
Yeah.
Toledano. And of course, I then got in touch with Phil and said, "Look, should we do something?" We ended up doing a fairly humorous hour on Instagram Live. I did an Instagram Live with Magnus as well, which is very kind of him and them both. And then got to know some people over the summer, like Etienne and Sasha. I mean, really great people that are designing, proper stuff, like Sasha, the designer of Koenigsegg, and Etienne, who designed the Voiture Noire. Just incredible people. So
Yeah.
I feel I'm in a very privileged position to be editing this little magazine here in the Cotswolds that's got a global reach because it's free and online. And another thing I'm fairly proud of is the fact that it's now reaching pretty much every country in the world.
Right.
Which it's free. I'm managing to get it out, as a free magazine, and it's I don't consider there to be competitors, only people that I want to work with. So any print magazine, as far as I'm concerned, is a colleague,
Right.
or an associate. I don't see anybody as in any way competitive.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. I mean, I just posted yesterday, on Instagram, a post about the idea of community and, businesses helping each other, and, we're all sort of in the same sandbox, if you will. So
Yeah, and especially now, I guess it's when it's
Sure.
when it's as tough as it is out there for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been lucky as well with the magazine, because when the first issue came out was when the world pretty much went into lockdown. So there was a lot of time where people were then forced to be at home and probably had much more time to flick around online and look at B500.
Yeah.
And possibly it grew through that period to where it is today. And organically on Instagram, it's grown as well. When I flew out to see Magnus, I had 300 followers on Instagram. And it's organically grown. I think there's about 7,500 now. So it's not massive, but it's organic growth, which basically means it's people that want to be there rather than, I don't understand these people that want to buy. I mean, what's that about? They want to buy followers. What on earth for? You either want people to follow you because they like what you're doing, or don't bother.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my only response to that would be herd mentality, right? Like where, the bigger following you appear to have will kind of make others want to join because, fear of missing out. It's that FOMO thing, and
Yeah.
well, this must be something good. I better follow as well. But, then you find 2 seconds later that the content isn't what you want anyway, or what have you. But, I've never paid for followers myself. Then again, my followership isn't even as large as yours. It's a third, for that matter. So, yeah, it's crazy. How do you define success for B500 then?
I think by the amount of countries that it's reached through, I got facts and figures through the software that I use for the load up for the content. And I've bought the maximum, whatever it is, platinum package of information that you get back from that. And it's always great on publication date and a few days after that, because you literally see a map of the world start pinging in color to where people have clicked on and looked at it from.
Right.
And it is pretty much now after what is this? I did 6 last year issues. So this will be effectively the 7th issue, and it's pretty much all over the world. And there's obvious places where it's not going to be, but pretty much everywhere else, there's like a shading of where people have looked at it. To answer the question though, how do I define success? I think I get a lot of email. I get a lot of positive comments on Instagram and through the magazine, and I guess that it's still a bit of a hobby for me. So it's not something that it's not something that I especially need to monetize. As I'm kind of consider myself to be almost retired, and this is a fun project that if other people are enjoying it, then I'll keep doing it. But if somebody says, hello, we're going to stop following you because we don't enjoy it anymore, we don't like your content, if I get a few 100,000 people that say that, then I might think otherwise. But until I get those emails and messages saying, negative ones, which I've never had, then I'll keep doing what I'm doing. I enjoy it. Hopefully everyone else enjoys it. We've got some great content, and we've got some amazing, not that I'm plugging it because there's no need to, because people either want to look at it or they don't. But I mean, this next one, I get so excited about each one.
Yeah.
The next one, I'm even more excited about the spring issue than I was about the one I did in December.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like any company. Like for me, for example, I mean, you're a one-man band, I'm a one-man band. I think it's like me doing a product launch. It's like I get so nervous and like almost feeling sick, like just because I want it to be received well, and I know the work that goes into the things that I do. And I mean, even when I launch a podcast, I'm like, well, I'm not even the guy speaking, but I just want somebody to like at least maybe like the questions asked, so that hopefully the conversation flows well and people are engaged, like, so be it content, your content, my products, what have you. It's
and on that subject, it obviously not through our conversation now, but we've got to talk about your watch box that I noticed, and I said we've got to talk about that, because that will work really well, I think, with a project through my other company, B500X, which is the design arm of B500.
Well, absolutely, we can talk about it. I think there was literally fewer than a handful of people that knew about my watch box ahead of time, and one who will still remain nameless was like, I really feel like this is the kind of product that could easily slide into that collaboration type atmosphere. And I said, by all means. So I've actually already got, I'll tease this. I already have one collaboration lined up, and that's, I'll leave those details for later, but yeah, I would absolutely love to talk to you about it. And
you're aware of I mean, it's out there for everyone to know, but you're aware of the collaboration that I'm doing with Etienne, Salome, and Arkonik. And we're producing, to begin with, we're producing 5 beach cruiser V8 Defenders. And what I wanted to do, and what Etienne wanted to do, Etienne's designing it, and then together we're collaborating on what we want to add into that as something that's a very exclusive package for each of the 5 owners. And one of the things that we'd thought about was to have a lockbox that's going to go in the back of the Defender. And within that lockbox, we're going to put some really, really cool goodies. And so one of those really cool goodies, I think we'll have to talk about with your watch box. And it's just such a unique thing that you've produced. And I immediately, when I saw it, I thought, this is very cool, and we're going to have a conversation about this. And it's kind of low number, with us, we're doing the 5 beach cruises where anyone that's going to have one of those can pick their own interior. They can pick their own exterior color from any palette of colors that they want to have.
Sure.
So it's a custom Etienne Salome Defender built by Arkonik. So 5 truly unique vehicles, and I'm super excited about that. And again, that's a project that came out of the relationship that I started with Etienne. And I wanted Arkonik to be involved because I think they produce a brilliant product. And it's, the North American, they're UK based, but North American sold pretty much, left-hand drive. And we got talking, and I like going back to when we were talking earlier about decision making. I can't be dealing with, sitting around a table of committee members and it goes on for months. Right. So I approached Arkonik. We wrapped this deal up within about 3 days, which is phenomenal for the amount of work that's going into this project. To wrap the whole thing up in 3 days, I was really impressed with the way they handled this. And then Etienne was the same. It was like, what do we need to do? And so we did the deal between the 3 of us. So it's a collaboration between Arkonik, B500, and Etienne. But that to me is how you do business, if you can.
Right.
It can't always be like that, but wherever possible, just to get people in a room that actually want to get on and do it, and then thrash out the details after that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, I'm kind of on board with what you're saying. Like, why marinate? It's a yes or a no kind of thing, you know?
Well, I worked with a guy many years ago. It's a funny story of we were going to go into business together, and I think back to it, and I think, oh, thank the Lord that I didn't, because I said, look, do you want to design the business cards? He said, yeah, that's a really good idea. 3 weeks later, he'd sent me, I don't know, 18 different variations on the business card. And I said, look, we got to, this isn't an important thing. We've got to just put our name on a card and run, just print them. And no, it's really important. I said, well, okay. 3 weeks later, we still hadn't made a decision. And in the end, we didn't go into business together. But I like to say, look, this is what I'm going to do. Here's a sketch of what I think it's going to look like. Let's say we're going to do business. And if along the way, something goes wrong, then fair enough. But we iron it out. We figure out between us how it's going to be worked out. And so far, since I think it was about August, probably, that we made the decision on the Arkonik deal. We're all getting on really well. We do Zoom calls between Etienne and the guys at Arkonik and myself, and we're thrashing it out. What they're going to look like, what the interiors are going to be. I wanted a bench seat, somebody else didn't, somebody wanted this, but you thrash it out, you get on with it, and you make it work.
Yeah.
And what I do know is our first one goes into production and will be finished week 1 of August. So we've thrashed that out between us. And we've got, there's been so many inquiries for it.
That's so exciting. Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. Since you launched B500, has your style of photography changed at all? Or do you kind of take the same approach? Like, how's it different?
That's an interesting question. No, I wouldn't say that it has. In fact, I suppose the only thing that's changed about it, well, 2 things. The only thing that's really changed is I haven't been able to do much of it because of the lockdown. So a lot of it is from people that have got stuff and we're working with companies that have got good stock photography that we're using or whatever. But we're now starting to get back out there. The world's opening up a little bit. And I've got, as I mentioned, my first proper shoot with this DB6. So the only thing that will be changing is that I'm getting, as I've mentioned earlier, back into analog. And so I want to produce a combination of, I shoot with Leica now. And so I'll be shooting digital Leica for the main shoot. And then I'd like to shoot some film as well to get some nice grainy shots that like I started with, years ago.
Yeah, it's funny. That was my next question is like, what's in the camera bag these days? So which Leica are you using primarily?
Well, do you know what? I have here's the thing, and it goes back to, I referenced David Bailey at the start of our conversation, and I'll reference him again now because he's always been a bit of an idol of mine. And it's something that he said many, many years ago, and that is that he doesn't take photographs, he takes pictures. And I kind of figured that as well. And I remember a conversation, he swears, at everyone like an absolute trooper. And I remember him saying years ago, but without the expletives, that it doesn't matter what you're shooting with, you're taking pictures, just get on with it. And I think there's a certain element of that. And so I'm not, because I shoot Leica, I'm not a Leica snob. The same as I wouldn't be an Olympus or a Nikon or a Canon snob. It's a tool, if you like. The reason that I've gone back to Leica is that they're just so reliable and mechanical, and even the digital ones are just such a beautiful thing to hold, and heavy, weighty camera.
And just the sound of the click.
And yeah, but I'm only using an X Vario, which is a low end. Some would say a compact, but it has such an amazing. I think it's a very underrated camera, first of all, and I think it's a lot of photographers that have used them have said it's a great way of putting it as well. It's a lens with a camera attached, because the lens is just a typical phenomenal Leica lens with basically a wraparound. So it's not a, it's not a, I don't know what's the Q Q2 or whatever it is, I don't need to spend, hundreds of thousands on the latest stuff to get shots that I'm going to get. And that's not me being arrogant because I've been a photographer for 40 years. It's just a fact. I can get shots with that. I did the David Gandy shoot for the issue 6 before Christmas, and I used the Xperio, and I'm absolutely, I don't really mind whether anyone else likes them, but I'm absolutely thrilled to bits with them. I took a couple of hundred pictures, and I would line those up against any other camera and say, what do you think of these, and see what other people think.
Well, David Gandy's an interesting subject, right? Because he's in front of the camera constantly. So was he mesmerized or shocked at all, like that you were using that camera as opposed to something maybe quote unquote heavier duty?
Oh, I thought at first you meant mesmerized as in, he'd met somebody that was as gorgeous as him.
Well, I'm sure that was the initial reaction.
We did have a laugh actually on that shoot, because he's, I don't know, 6 foot whatever the heck he is, and I'm 5 foot whatever the heck I am. And there was, I think it was about a foot difference, and we did have a bit of a laugh about things like that. And clearly he's a very successful male model, probably the most successful male model of his time. A genuinely lovely guy, and we did have a good laugh on that shoot. Not at all pretentious about anything. And we had a couple of people that happened to walk past at the hotel we shot it at and say, hey, do you mind if I have a look? And I would just stand back and, stop filming, stop shooting, let whoever have a look around the car. He was again, open the door, have a look, have a look at it. And it was a very low key shoot. But no, not in the slightest. I mean, he's used to magazine work. He's used to working with, I'm sure, many different photographers using all sorts of equipment and tons of equipment. But I guess I'm kind of, I'd describe myself, if I was going to describe myself, as old school. Someone that I'd be quite happy turning up with a little compact camera and still getting good results.
Right.
And I think that goes back to how I did my, inverted commas training of when I was 13, knowing how to use a camera. But it also then brings me forward to answer your question fully of what am I using? And the answer is that a modern up-to-date Leica digital, but also a 1938 Leica film camera.
Oh, beautiful.
So, going from one extreme to the other, really, where and it's really a testament to the quality of Leica that these things, 85 years old?
Yeah, that they endure. Yeah.
It's a piece, it's an engineered, possibly over-engineered mechanical device that just works and does what it's supposed to do. And I guess that's why I use them rather than it happens to have the red dot on the front.
Yeah, sure.
1938 one doesn't, but
right.
Well before that. But it's because of what it is and how it works. I think that's important when you're doing a job, and it is a job. I need to get good results from what I'm doing, so I see it as a job. I've got to get good results. So after all these years, I need to use something that I know I'm going to be happy using.
Yeah, totally. I know a lot of photographers speak about how important it is to print their work. Do you ever print your photos these days? I know they live online, obviously.
Yeah, not anymore. And I think there's a bit of a sadness to that. But equally, there's also it's a really interesting point. And about a month ago, I made this massive decision to go through some boxes of 35mm slides that I had from 30-40 years ago. And I mean, I had thousands of them, and I just made the decision to actually get rid of them and dump them. And it wasn't as hard a decision as I first thought it was going to be. And Caroline was like, what are you doing? You can't do that. It's like your life's work. But really it wasn't, because as with any photographer, you take hundreds, of shots. And so you have hundreds. Back then when it was film and transparency, you'd have hundreds and thousands from shoots. So if you take my Seychelles work, for instance, where I was there for 6 months, I had thousands of pictures that I was never going to look at again that were kind of usable but would never be used. And so I just needed to have a bit of a clear out, really. Maybe it was
Yeah.
something when I hit 60, I thought, oh, you know what, I've got to clear my life out of it. And I did the same with prints. I had printed off thousands upon thousands of photographs. And I spent, a lot of time, maybe as much as a week, going through these during lockdown and just putting one pile of keep and one pile of get rid of. And I was happy enough to get rid of the pile of get rid ofs that I'd made. And, and I don't miss them. I won't ever miss them, never look at them again. And I hadn't looked at them for 20 odd years. So they've all gone. And the ones I know that I should keep, ones that perhaps have family members or people in and that sort of stuff, then they went into the keep box. So it's an interesting point, because to answer it, no, I don't feel the need to go through that process again of printing. The only thing that I would do is if I was doing a special limited edition print of something special, then I would do it as, I love the words limited edition. I love the fact that it's small number. I don't want to do anything that's big number, or for the sake of printing. I don't see the point of it. And we live our lives online now. And so I know that, on my iPhone, I've got thousands of images, and I do the same with my iPhone. I have a clear out, and I don't know many people that, maybe people do, but certainly, Caroline is one. I'm always saying to her, why have you kept that? I mean, she's like, get rid of that, get rid of that. And I tell her which one she's got to get rid of. And she says, no, I'm keeping that. I said, well, it's just a field. Why do you want to keep a field?
It's funny. I have a pretty large external hard drive with several terabytes, and yeah, I like every 2 years, 18 months, something like that. I'll go through my iPhone and then just drag them to that, just in case I need to find that photo at once upon a time or something like that. And I'll create some folders and such. But
I have I've always had a very throwaway. I've always been a very throwaway person, which I don't know is a particularly good thing, but I kind of lived my life out of 3 or 4 boxes. And maybe it was because I used to travel so much and live in different parts of the world
I'm
that,
sure.
you can kind of condense. I'm perfectly settled now where we are in the Cotswolds, but you could probably put all my possessions in 3 boxes.
Right.
And I quite like that. I'm not a hoarder of stuff and never have been.
Right.
I'm not a collector, and I love the fact that people, if you are in a position to collect cars, then why not, if that's your thing? But for me, if I had a big enough disposable income to collect cars, I still wouldn't, because I can't, in my mindset, I can't figure out why I would want more than one. Of course, I'm in the minority, and I understand that, because I live my life out of 3 boxes, and most people have a lot more content in their life than that. But yeah, I'm a bit of a throwaway kind of guy. I get rid of things, and that was a big clear out for me with the photographs.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I collect, that I guess I'm open about collecting, really, and that's watches. Obviously, I don't have the space for cars, and I think, it initially, when you get into something, you just start seeing so many. You're like, well, I want one of those, and I want one of these, and I want. But the more you educate yourself on the subject and your taste refines, your ability to remove certain pieces or remove certain cars from your quote unquote list, it's just easier to do, really. And, with watches, it's kind of like, okay, well, you think of the number of different occasions, right? There's only a few. There's sports watches, dress watches, and then maybe like the daily wear or something, or the one you can garden in and not worry about dirt and things like that. But outside of that, it's just kind of like, well, there's only 7 days in a week, right? So it's kind of that way with cars as well. It's like I've got my city driver, I've got my my saloon car for long hauls, I got my track car to go track and have a good day, and then maybe a vintage car. So you could, and then maybe an SUV. So you got 5 situations where they're different, but like, why do I need 50 cars when 5 will do?
Yeah. You double up on those cars, and then suddenly you've got 3 SUVs, and you've got 3 vintage, and So I think it's easy to do, but it's just not easy for me to do. And on the watches thing, I I've had some nice watches over the years, and sold them again because of my giveaway throwaway kind of mentality. But I've just invested literally last week in an Apple Watch.
Sure.
And I suddenly think that that's now for me. It was probably watch people that might be listening to this will be turning off and thinking, what is this guy talking about? But I can change the screen on it. Like I've just changed the strap on it. I've got a nice brown leather strap on it with a nice, normal looking face on the watch. But I can swap it in 10 minutes and it will be something else. And that for me is fine. And it's got all the gadgets I could ever want on it, and it matches all my Apple products, so that's all good. And what's funny about that, you see, is then that I now have a watch box with watches turning round that I know I'm not going to go and put on, because I've now got this Apple Watch. And you think, well, there you go, got the the watch turner, and I've got the watches in there, and I've got a couple of other nice watches I haven't mentioned, and I was going to buy the Chopard Mille Millier, and you think, well, why?
Sure.
And so I'm getting to that sort of stage really where I think, well, as much as I want it, it's want versus need. I was going to do a section in B500 this next issue, and I've actually cancelled it now. But I guess there's some irony in there. It was going to be called Want versus Need, and I guess that I didn't feel the need to actually do the section, but it was going to be some very expensive gadgets and things to do with cars, and the whole purpose of the section was, do you want it or do you need it? You certainly don't need it, but yeah, you want it. You might want an MB&F. Who wouldn't want a Max Busse watch? But do you want to spend 280,000 on it? Yeah, there's loads of people that want to do it because they sell out. But it's not. You don't need it.
Right.
You want it, and that it still might be a section that turns up. It's in the magazine. Who knows? I'm working with a guy at the moment for the next issue. I won't say who he is, but it'll become very obvious when the next issue comes out. And he has what I would say is one of my favorite car collections. I think he's nailed his collection with his choices, and he's just added something very special to that collection. And as I say, when the next issue comes out, people will know exactly who I'm talking about and where this guy lives. But for me, he's hit every car I would hit as well. That he's got in his collection.
Any teasers? Like, what country does he live in?
I'll give you a teaser, but if I give you a teaser, everyone that knows anything about Instagram and cars is going to go, oh yeah, we know now. So
Okay.
I'm going to pretty much give it away, and I'm sure he won't mind because he's obviously in the issue.
Well, this episode will air in like a month's time.
Oh yeah, okay. So there we go. It's if you think Abertoni Verde F40.
Okay, got it.
So there's not too many green F40s around.
Right. That's such a cool green too.
It really is, and the interior is it's kind of my dream color interior to go with it. The I don't know, you'd call it maybe cognac or I don't know what he calls it, what it is, but yeah, I mean his collection is, I think, phenomenal, and he's got a couple. He's got the one that's actually going on our front cover for next issue, and then he's also got something else that's coming out that's in a stunning sky blue that in a month from now might be finished and ready to be delivered as well.
Sure.
Super nice guy and super collection of cars. So what more could you ask in B500?
What was your first car?
Oh wow, my first car was a gift actually from my parents, and it was their car, and they were upgrading their car and thought that I passed my license in the UK in London first time, and that's because I'd been driving with my dad on my family's farm, the same people that then moved to Canada, for years since I was about 12. He would let me drive around on their land, and I eventually inherited as a gift their car, and it was a Datsun 180 Bluebird.
Amazing.
Mustard in mustard yellow, and it was at that time, I'm going back, it was 1978. It was a super cool car to have in 1978. Some people listen to this would probably disagree with that, But I think as an 18-year-old in '78, it was a pretty cool car. It was a fastback. And yeah, I had that until I rolled it and wrote it off.
Wow.
Very quickly after taking possession of it. So a better question would be, what was your second car?
Right. What was your second car then?
My second car was a lot cooler. It was a John Player Special 3-liter Ford Capri.
Wow.
So yeah, even cool today, I would say.
So what are you driving today?
Well, I'm as I like to say, in between cars.
Ah.
We've got a Mini Clubman. I don't know whether it's 2017, 2018, 2016 Mini Clubman, the one with the back doors that open.
Yep.
The best gadget on that car when you've got wet dogs, because it's like a dog car.
Right.
The best gadget on that on the fob is you can open the back doors from 20 feet away, so that by the time you reach it, the dogs can just jump in the back, and it's a bit of a shit pit. It's just completely, but it's great putting camera gear in the back when the dogs aren't in it. I have been through every kind of series of Mercedes, to the point where I'm now not sure. In fact, we were only talking about it yesterday, whether I'm going to get another variation of an SUV Mercedes, or a Porsche Macan, or even a Cayenne, which is slightly bigger.
Right.
Not sure. But again, I'm in the process of also going through that mental consideration of Arkonik, for obvious reasons.
Sure.
Which would also be a great option. We live in the countryside. We live very much in the countryside here. And the roads around Gloucestershire, where we live in the Cotswolds, are little lanes, and they're full of potholes, like big, where you lose the Mini down a pothole. They're that big. Right. And so it's for me, I'm kind of into the bigger SUVs, but haven't got it at the moment until such time as I make a decision. And I'm terrible at making decisions.
Yeah. No, exactly. Well, Del,
this has been fun.
Yeah. Well, this has been a ton of fun, Del. I really appreciate you taking the time. For those listening, can you share basically the best ways for people to find out about B500 and subscribe, if you will? And
yeah, I guess the best way is through Instagram. And that's quite simply at B500 Magazine.
Okay.
And then either follow us on B500 Magazine. There's in the bio, there's a link to the issues, and that's the easiest way of getting onto the issues. They're all free. You don't need to subscribe. You don't need to have any tie-in or whatever it is. You just click the link in the Instagram bio, and it will take you to the platform, which is Issue, ISSW, which is another way of finding B500.
Cool.
And it runs through that, and it's we're producing quarterly issues this year, so the next one is spring, and then we go from there. Awesome.
Well, I thank you again.
Oh no, thanks. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate the fact that you've invited me on to do it, and hope I haven't waffled on for too long about nothing.
No, not at all. Cool. Well, we'll chat soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it, and okay. Thanks again, Wesley.
Absolutely, thank you. I'd like to thank Del again. He's an incredibly gracious person that I could easily spend all day talking to. As evidence, we actually spoke for an additional 30 to 45 minutes after hitting stop on the recorder. So big thanks again to Del. As usual, thanks to Clear Audio for providing the noise cancellation headphones, as well as to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for providing the theme track. I'll catch you guys in another 2 weeks for what we are closing in on as the end of season 4. Thanks so much for listening.